Okay, I'll start my presentation. Again, my name is Jenny Kedward. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I need to share my screen or you will not see what I'm seeing. Okay, so you should be able to share a few Zoom housekeeping notes. You can, like I said, unmute yourself and ask questions since we're a small bunch, or you can write your questions in the chat box, which is if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you should see a little icon that looks like a word bubble, and you can put your questions in there. And I might not see them all the time right away, but I will definitely be checking that and get back to you. All right, let's get started. We're talking about food smarts tonight. Save the food, and what do I mean? I'm so glad you're interested in this too. It's one of my favorite topics. And it's really, out of all of the waste topics I talk about, it's the one that has the opportunity to have the biggest impact. And it's great because we all eat, so we can all have an impact. I love this topic. So there's a few questions I always get that we're going to go over. The first one that people tell me is, Jenny, don't worry, I don't waste food. I compost everything. And that's great. I love composting. I mean, part of my time is talking about composting and educating about that. But we're going to see why composting isn't always the biggest solution to our food problem. One other thing I want to note is I mindfully use the term wasted food on purpose. When we use the term food waste, it really puts all the emphasis on the word waste. Waste is what do we do with the waste? How do we get rid of it? That's where composting comes in, donating, landfilling, all of that stuff we talk about. When you talk about wasted food, you put the emphasis on the word food, which is really what we want to focus on tonight. How do we use the food that we have? And if we're wasting the food, then that's just something that we can fix. So how much food is wasted? There was a report that came out in 2012 and then again in 2017, and it's by the National Resource Defense Council. And it kind of blew the lid off of this whole issue. And they found out that we waste 40% of all of the food we have in the US. 40%, which is mind-blowing. So I just like to take a moment and let that sink in. 40% of all food that we import and grow in America. In the world as a whole, so all countries included in this, it's around 30%. But in the US, 40% of all food is wasted. Whew, that's a lot. And what does that mean? That means all of the resources that went into growing our food are also wasted. So it's not just a surplus of food that's going to the landfill. We spend 19% of all of our land on growing food that we don't eat. So all of those resources to keep our land valuable for farming or ranching, all of that gets wasted. 21% of all of our fresh water. Now, I grew up in Colorado, where every drop of rain is owned by someone. Like, water is so valuable there. We don't think about it as much in Minnesota. We play in it a lot, but we don't have to worry so much about our drinking water. Well, 21% of all our fresh water in the US goes to grow food we don't eat, which, you know, we might think we have plenty of it in Minnesota, but in regions that don't, that's a lot of our water going to waste. And these are just two of the statistics in the report. There's also fertilizer usage, labor usage, transportation across the world to get bananas here, and then they don't get used. So all of those embedded costs are lost. So even if we composted every single piece of food that we could, and we very much don't, we are well below 10% of what we actually compost. Even if we composted 100% of what we could compost, we're still wasting all of these resources on the front end of growing our food. But that's why it's also really exciting when you talk about food, is the little bit that we can do to save this food has these ripple effects all upstream, and it's amazing what we can do. This is just talking about environmental costs. We also know, especially right now, we're in COVID times, the hunger issue, our social issues surrounding food. 1 in 11 people in the U.S. is hungry, or is food insecure. That means they don't know where their next meal is coming from. Now, that's a statistic from Feeding America that I don't think includes what is happening right now in COVID. So I'm sure it's much higher. So at one time, we're wasting 40% of all of our food, yet people are going hungry. So I like to call it we don't have a food problem. We grow plenty of food to feed the whole world. We have a food distribution problem, that we have food growing and we can't get it to the right people at the right time. So what do we do about it? The next thing people say to me is, Jenny, this is a great topic. We should definitely talk about this. You should just go talk to all those restaurants that are wasting food. They're the ones doing it. So it's kind of putting the blame on someone else. And they're partially right. Who is wasting the food? So this is documented in the NRDC report and has been documented by others as well. Food waste happens at all levels of the supply chain. So from production and processing, this is just a snapshot. This gentleman is standing in front of a huge pile of bananas in South America, where we get all of our bananas. And the only reason these bananas are not being purchased, they're all going to go to the dump. All these bananas are going away or going to the landfill because they're not the right length or curvature that meet the specifications by grocery stores, which is phenomenal that there's all of this food that is perfectly good. Nothing is wrong with it, but the specific specifications. Now, not to blame grocery stores too, because who shops at grocery stores and puts these perfect standards on our food? We do. So we expect food to be perfect. If you've ever grown anything in a garden, you know that things do not come out perfect. It's actually kind of amazing when something comes out perfect. One of my theory is the farther we get from growing our own food or taking care of our own food, we forget how imperfect food is when it's grown in the wild. So we expect perfection at grocery stores. The other, going up the supply chain, processing. So anytime, if you can picture a grocery store, all on the outskirts of a grocery store, are all of your whole foods, your fruits and vegetables, your milk, your meat products. All of those are minimally processed, if anything. But as soon as you get inside the aisles of your grocery store, everything is processed. And every time you process food, you're taking away something or maybe adding something to it. For instance, this is a big pile of potato peels from a potato chip factory, because they peel potatoes when they're making potato chips. That's why you never see them on your potato chips. So all of those peels, which is actually the most nutritious part of a potato, get thrown away. Maybe they would be composted, maybe not. They're usually not. So every time we put food through a different process, we take some kind of nutrition away and throw it away. Getting closer to us, this is where usually people see the most food waste, because we're a very visual culture. We're a visual species where when we like to see things. So this is where we see food in aggregate at grocery stores, at restaurants. And that's just because there's a lot of food there, because that's how they're getting food to us. Buffets are a great example of this. We expect buffets to be always going with fresh food all the time. And then what's happened over the last 50 years as well is an example of being served too much. And usually you see the two plated meals there. Usually you see that picture when you're talking about nutrition in public health or overeating, dieting, all that stuff. But we talk about it in our world too, for our food waste world, because we're often served more than we can eat. So what we are served is on the right, and or on the left, and what we should be served or what we should eat is on the right. So we have the choice of overeating or wasting food, maybe bringing it home. And oftentimes we do both. We overeat and we still waste food. And then bagels. I just love this depiction of a bagel because my husband knows it's one of the things that just get me going, how big bagels are nowadays. Like bagels used to be like the size, like smaller than your hand, like a reasonable size bagel in the 1970s, which is the smaller one. And then now a bagel nowadays is just huge. So our food is bigger. So we also we could waste more because of that big food. So now we're getting closer to us. Yes, grocery stores and retail places do waste food, and we do work with them at Dakota County we have a whole grant set up to help retailers of food prevent this waste, and compost too for the food that they can't save. So we are working with them. We're not ignoring them for sure. There's great opportunity there. But what the NRDC report found is actually out of everyone I just mentioned, consumers, us, we're the biggest wasters. And that's because it might just be a little bit here and there, food scraped off your plate, things that have died in your fridge. We've all been there. It might seem like a little bit, but there's just more of us. There's millions of us. So it adds up pretty quick. The best thing I can say about educating about wasted food and prevention of wasting food is no one wants to waste food. And that's awesome because uh, no one's ever come up to me and said, I don't care. I don't care about wasting food. It's ingrained into our psyches as Americans to not waste food. So what are we doing? Like, how are we wasting all of this food? If we care so much about it, if we were brought up saying, don't eat everything on your plate, don't waste food, what are we doing? Well, of course, it kind of comes down to lifestyle and habits. So our brain is on automatic. That means that you might feel like this person in the grocery store, maybe not right now. I don't think any of us would lay down in the grocery store, but you might feel like this when you're at the grocery store. You've had a long day. You don't know what you're cooking. You just go to the grocery store. You go down the same aisles. You pick the same things. We're just on autopilot. We're busy people. Going into the next term, which is one of my favorite terms, dynamic lifestyle, which really just means we're all busy. We might be good planners, and then your friends call up and want to go do happy hour. Now, this is pre-COVID, obviously. So things get in the way of our plans. Good intentions go awry. No planning at all. So even if you didn't have a plan, nothing to go awry because you never had a plan in the first place. And then we don't really know how to store our food well. I don't know about you, but I grew up just watching what my parents did. No one ever sat me down saying, here's how you store an apple. Like, you never had that conversation, right? So improper storage, we just kind of throw everything in the fridge and hope for the best. Well, we have tools to help you. So any questions right now before we go through any tools or anything, please unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. I'll just keep talking unless you interrupt me. Great. It's a lot to take in, but we have so much opportunity. And we have tools. So the first thing, I call this my least sexiest handout because it's the one that no one wants to take or do, but it's the one that will help you tremendously actually understand yourself more. So it's, of course, knowing yourself more. I don't want to do that. I just want the easy things. Well, this makes it easy to change your habits. So this is just tracking what you're tossing. This is a handout, and I'll send all of these to you by email afterwards as well. But you can find them on our county website, dakotacounty.us, search wasted food. So the whole point of this handout is to take, I like to say 4 weeks, even better if you can do 6 weeks. So you could have been doing this some of COVID times, or I'm sure we're going to keep going. So maybe this is a project for you for the next 4 weeks. And you track the things that you could have eaten and didn't. So I don't want the egg shells or banana peels, like those, you're not going to be able to eat those. So you can't change your habits. So put the things that you would have eaten, but didn't. And this is also subjective of, like, my household, we like to incorporate the stems of broccoli. And I know some other households are like, nope, we don't eat that. It's not food to us. So it's really what you would have eaten. What was it? When did you toss it? And then one of the big things is that price column. So we also say, keep your receipts as you're doing this tracking. And let's say you only ate a half a head of cabbage. Well, then go to your receipt and divide that price in half. The average family of 4 in the US tosses $800 worth of food, which is an extra paycheck. What would you do with $800 more? We're just throwing it away. And then the last column is the most important one, right? So going through your habits, you can kind of see, what could I do differently the next time? And even if you don't fill this out, even if it's just being mindful, that's all it is. It's just understanding yourself, how you move in your kitchen, where you put things in your kitchen. The next time you clean out your fridge, you could just do this as well. You don't have to track it for 4 weeks. You could just do a fridge clean out and mark like, oh, I got rid of this. Oh, I forgot to eat it. You'll start to see a pattern of what you do. And then it's really easy to understand, like, I need to do this more. And for my family, our first things when we were tracking was we need to meal plan. One of the biggest things that are the biggest factors for us meal planning, or starting to several years ago, was budgeting. We were on a tight budget. We were saving for a house. We really needed to manage our money, which is fine. Whatever your goal is, it also is great because it wastes less food. So meal planning. I mean, we've all heard meal planning. Like, yes, we know, or we start off like, yes, I'm going to plan meals and it lasts a week and you bomb and that's it. So I'm going to tell you my secrets that I've learned over the many years of teaching this that people have told me and experimenting and doing, adjusting our meal planner. So the first thing, and of course, this is kind of based on pre-COVID times. So adjust for COVID now. But when we actually had evening activities, besides an hour online class like you're doing now, I would say the first thing you want to do is put your evening activities under that last row in the large table. And that will really tell you what days you have time to eat. Uh, I highly recommend not trying to plan 7 days of meals. You'll overdo yourself. Something will happen and you don't want failures. You don't want to set yourself up to fail. What I tell people is what you'll find easiest is 3 to 4 meals. Only plan 3 to 4 meals a week. And that can be different. For our household, we've planned Monday through Thursday, our meals. Friday is our catch-all day, where either we have extra leftovers, it made too much and we don't want to freeze it, so we're going to eat it. So it's kind of our buffet night, like whatever you want to eat. Or we did really well and we ate everything. So it's our takeout night, it's our treat night. And then Saturdays and Sundays for us, we just eat kind of erratically on those weeks. So it's more up in the air for us on weekends. But find out what your family likes to do. What would work well for you? Maybe it's really, Thursday through Tuesday, or, find 3 to 4 days that work for you. And it could change every week too. For us right now, our treat is we're meal planning actually every day because I have no evening activities. So we're meal planning every day, but we have Sundays we order out. So that's the treat, right? Which is nice because it relieves that pressure of having to plan a meal. So those are my meal planning tips for you. Then you could do one of two things. When you're doing your 3 to 4 meals, you can either go to your kitchen, see what you have to eat, and then find recipes for it. That's an excellent way to do that. Or you can have a go-to list of your recipes, like the things that you feel comfortable making. We have this in a Google spreadsheet so that we just always have it like on the go. So in case I forget my list. So we can go through and see, like, we have about 30 recipes that we just have added over the years of, we love to make these. They're easy, they're delicious, we look forward to them. So then we pick maybe 2 or 3 out of that list every week, and then we add in a new one just to try out. And then it depends on what we have to eat up. And it also depends on the season, right? So we're going into summer, hopefully this week. And you might be so sick of stews and soups, you are not going to add those to your list. But in winter, it's full of soups and stews. So of course, it depends on the season as well and what your tastes are. But having it that's doable. 3 to 4 has been shown to be doable, achievable. You feel good about it. And then just don't be hard on yourselves. If 1 week you fail, that's okay. There's a next week. Don't worry. The other way to, when you have your meals, your list, you can see on this bottom chart here, meals to make, and you list your meals. And then in the middle column, you actually take your list or whatever you're doing, and you go shop your kitchen first to see what you already have on hand. And then from the ingredient list. And then the last column is the list of stuff you need. And I love this list because it's not that much actually. When you have most of the stuff, you might need some like basics of the chicken or the broccoli or something, but It makes your list really easy. And then you're in and out of the grocery store. And especially right now, in and out is great. And we'll talk more about some apps and online things to help you if you're an online person instead of a printout like this. I can tell you, my husband and I, we used something like this for a year. And then once it was a habit, we can just do it on the back of an envelope. Like, you don't need a fancy chart, obviously, but if you like structure and you like planning out like that, it really does help. Storage. So the big thing about storage is we're halfway doing it right. We have some improvements to make. I'm going to send you in the follow-up email, I'll send you a great storage guide. We have printouts like this. This is one of our printouts. For online, I highly recommend savethefood.com. They have an interactive resource where you can just type in an item. You can also, if you have a smart speaker, you can actually enable the Save the Food app on your Alexa or your smart speaker. So then you can say, Alexa, how do you store cabbage? And it'll tell you. It's pretty cool. Some hot tips that everyone always loves learning and that we're usually doing wrong. Tomatoes. 50% of people store tomatoes wrong. If I was in person with you, I'd ask you if you stored them on the counter or in the fridge. The proper place is on the counter until they're really ripe and you want to kind of push the pause button on them, then you put them in the fridge. Pretty much your fridge is used to slow growth. But things need to ripen a little more too, and that's when we want them on our counters. The onions and potatoes do not get stored together, which I grew up with. My mom always stored onions and potatoes together. That was just how it was. Well, they make each other ripen. So they both like cool, dark, dry places, but keep them separate. Just don't intermingle them. The other thing is all produce, bananas, apples, oranges, all of that, they give off a certain kind of gas called ethylene gas. Completely natural. It just makes them decompose so that their seeds when they're dropped in nature, ethylene gas starts the rotting process and the seeds can carry on to be eaten by animals or start a new plant. Completely natural, we need it. Well, you can actually control this ethylene gas, which slows the ripening of your food. The biggest, I call them the bullies of the produce world. Apples and bananas give off the most ethylene gas, bananas especially. So don't store your bananas in your beautiful fruit bowl. I know they add a pop of yellow color. It's great. They look great. I store mine just on the counter right outside my fruit bowl, and that's fine. You can also unbunch your bananas, so take them apart, and they'll last longer. So bananas, they give off a lot of ethylene gas. You can also get ethylene absorbers. There's bags or little kind of charcoal filters that absorb ethylene gas that you can put by your fruit or in your crisper drawers. I've seen them at Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, online, obviously. One thing though that's fun about ethylene gas is, say you have an avocado, and it's very rare in Minnesota that we get like fresh avocados, right? Like they come from a distance and they're very hard when they get here. So if you need to make guacamole the next day and you have some avocados that haven't ripened yet, put your avocado in a paper bag with a banana and close it up. Overnight, it will ripen because of the ethylene gas given off by the banana. It's pretty cool, magical. The other fun tip is any cut herbs. Let's say you had a recipe and you had to get cilantro, and you get them in the bunch at the store and you only need like 3 sprigs of it, and then you have all this cilantro. What do you do with it? You can make it last longer by putting any cut herbs, including asparagus too, in a glass jar with a little bit of water at the bottom, and that makes it last longer. Pretty much treat it like cut flowers. In fact, I meant to bring it over. I have green onions that are in a little mason jar with water on the bottom. And I've had them for 3 weeks and they're still growing. I chop off some of the top. They keep sprouting. I think I've gotten the most to last about 6 or 7 weeks. And then the roots kind of get a little gross. Other things, get to know your fridge. Fridges have gotten kind of complicated in the last 50 years. I kind of laugh and cringe at the sizes of our fridges in America. If you go anywhere else in the world, it's a dorm fridge. Like that's the main fridge. We have huge fridges here. So we should know them a little more. Newer fridges at least have a temperature, a readable temperature inside. Your fridge should be about 38 to 40 degrees. I have an older fridge that has the kind of the dial that's 1 through 5, which is pretty meaningless. Like 1 through 5, I don't really know what that means. I think it's getting colder. So you can actually put a thermometer in and take the reading of your fridge to make sure it's working properly. The coldest part of your fridge is the bottom. I think you can see my cursor. It's where the crisper drawers are here. It's right in the middle of your fridge, middle bottom. So put things like meat and things that will go bad very quickly, put them in that middle section. That means your milk too. Don't put the warmest part of your fridge is the door of your fridge because it constantly opens up and it gets contact from the room temperature air. So don't put anything there that could spoil. No milk in the door, no eggs. That's really like your condiments should be in your door of your fridge. Yeah, so the crisper drawers too. You should have a crisper drawer for your vegetables and a crisper drawer for the fruit that does go in the fridge. One thing I wanted to say too about food storage is if you can't remember, you're not going to go to the website to figure out how to store your food. Just think about where you got it in the store. Was it under like the cold, like shower misty area towards the back of the produce area? That's your fridge. Was it in the middle of the produce area where it's just in big bins? That's your counter. There you go. The freezer. I only met my freezer about 3 years ago. I don't know what I was doing with my freezer before. I guess making ice. I don't know what I was doing, losing things in the fridge. I love my freezer now because I feel more empowered about it. You can freeze basically everything. And I'm going to send you a handout that we use that on it's this handout. On the back of the handout actually gives you a list from the Food and Drug Administration of everything you can freeze and how long it lasts in the freezer. It's awesome because it gives you ideas of like, oh, I didn't know I could freeze that. Such as we are a small household, so we don't go through bread as fast as other people. So we'll take half of our bread out and put it in another container, and then put half of our bread in our freezer, and then it lasts longer. One thing I've learned over the years of getting to know my freezer, and I love freezing anything. It's like a gift to my future self. Like, here's a free meal, future Jenny. Enjoy. I love it. Soups, anything really that you want to thaw out in the future. If you don't portion or put it into smaller portions when you freeze it, you're going to have to thaw all of it to maybe only get and use half. And then refreezing is always it doesn't work as well. So I have learned to freeze in portions. I often freeze in mason jars, so that's perfect because especially soups and stews, it's a little pint jar is perfect for like 2 people. Keep it airtight. What causes freezer burn is air touching your food. So trying to get all that air out. One tip that someone else gave me is if you use freezer bags, putting a little straw at the very end, like seal up your whole bag with your food in it, and then put a little straw at the very end and suck out the last air, and then yank your straw and zip tight. That's a great way to do your own little vacuum seal. No need for the fancy equipment. Leave room for liquids. Like I said, I use glass a lot for freezing. It's great to stack too. Well, I have broken mason jars in my freezer before, so learn my lesson that way. Liquid expands. We know that, right? Elementary school, we remember liquids expand. So when I freeze liquids or really anything that would expand, when I do it in a mason jar, I leave the lid off for the first night, and then I screw on the lid after that. And I'm glad I've done that many times because then I can't screw on the lid, which means I overfilled it. Blanching, which is a horrible sounding word for something very easy to do. I was always intimidated by blanching food. I didn't really know what it meant, but it's really just really trapping the nutrients in our vegetables. You don't need to blanch any fruits. They go into the freezer ready to go. But vegetables often lose nutrients if you just throw them in the freezer. You can still do that. They're still fine. But if you want to lock in some of that nutrients, then I would, you boil water, you drop your vegetables in the boiling water for, depending it's usually 10 seconds is good. There's different, you can look up the blanching time for certain vegetables, uh, and then immediately put them in an ice bath, so just ice water. And then you're done. That's it. It takes seconds, but it sounds so intimidating. And labeling, because label everything that goes in your freezer, because everything will look the same in your freezer after a week. It just does, and you don't want to be hunting in there and trying and guessing. Uh, we'll talk about yeah, here we go. So what's in stock? So this is something that we've used in our household, and many other people actually have given us this idea, and so we made it a tool for Dakota County. Is you don't want to stand there with your freezer door open because it's just uncomfortable, especially in winter, and you don't want to hunt in your freezer. So you can actually use this inventory sheet. So it goes, you can use it as refrigerator, freezer, and pantry. We turned it all into our freezer, and so that's currently what's on the outside of my freezer right now. After using this for a time period, I actually got one laminated. So then you can use dry erase, and it's way easier. This is great. Everything that goes in my freezer, I put it on for dry erase, and then when I take something out, I erase it. Someone also just recently told me instead of laminating, you can use a sheet protector. So if you have a sheet protector, that works just as well as laminating with dry erase. Date labels. So date labels can be kind of controversial. I've talked to many people who are like, you will never convince me to eat anything after a date label. People are pretty hardcore about date labels sometimes. I can tell you, and if I was there with you and I would make you guess what one product, there's only one product that is mandated by federal law to be date labeled. And I'll just tell you, people who, when I ask this in person, it's usually, oh, well, meat, obviously, or dairy, eggs, anything like that. Nope, it's baby formula. So baby formula is the only thing that is mandated by law to be date labeled because it could affect a child's growth and nutrition. Every single date that you see out there is made up by the manufacturer and based on whatever they're testing. There's no government agency regulating date labels. They work with federal agencies, these manufacturers, but there's no, they don't mean anything for safety. There's no safety guidelines. So you might see use by, sell by, best before by, they're all made up by the manufacturer, and they're really a communication device from the manufacturer to the grocery store to really get product moving. It does not mean there's any health side effects if you eat or drink that product after that date. And date labels are pretty recent. We didn't have them over 40, 50 years ago. They're a pretty recent invention, and I think it is just to get product moving out the door. Um, and to track product, to actually have, there's more barcodes and different kinds of codes on our food to track down if there was an illness based on E. coli and salmonella. So you can go by date labels as a general guide, but what did we do before date labels? We used our senses. So you smell it, you look at it, is it moldy? You taste it. I would recommend if you're tasting something and you're not sure, just have a chaser nearby. Have a little like juice ready to go. So if it tastes bad, it just tastes bad. You're not going to get sick from something being uh, out of date. What will get you sick are the things that are cross-contamination of E. coli or something from meat getting onto something that isn't meat. So cross-contamination, nothing to do with date labels. The other thing, so remember, don't get me started on the sizes of our fridge. Well, one of the bad things about our fridge is, since they're so big and deep, a lot of our food just gets pushed back to the nether regions of our fridge to never be seen again. We all do it. I'm sure I have something in our fridge right now that's pushed back to the bottom. Well, something that helps us and has been shown to help people around the country is actually having an area of your fridge called Eat First or Eat Me First. So you can get an easy container. You can use a shoebox if you want. You can use anything. You could even just label or have a shelf in your fridge. The best thing, if you can do it, is having a clear container, even a clear shoebox, plastic shoebox that I know they're at 99 cents at Target. You get that, put an Eat First sticker on it, and put everything in there that you're afraid will get pushed to the back. Let's say like we tonight had a half an onion that we didn't use 2 nights ago. So that was in our eat first area to make sure that I used it when I cooked tonight. Easy. And I might have forgotten about it and cut another onion. We do have these eat first stickers on our website as well, and I'll send that to you. And then using up food. So I know many people, I love leftovers. I love leftovers because I don't want to cook every night and I think it's a gift to have leftovers. But some people don't, or they have families that just like their kids or their spouses will not eat leftovers. And that's just a taste thing. So what I like to say is don't use the word leftovers. You can get creative about your food or reinvent your leftovers. So adding things into other things to make them to mask that it's even a leftover. So here are things like if you have extra beans, you put them in chili or you put them in a stew. Anything can really go in a casserole, a smoothie, or an omelet. Those are like the catch-alls, right? Like even greens can go in your smoothie. Spinach, kale, if you just need, if it's wilty, you don't care if it's wilty in your smoothie, it's going to be blended. Savory things, definitely throw them all in. We usually have an omelet every other week and just throw everything that's kind of starting to go bad and put it in our omelet. And we are the land of casseroles. Get that hot dish out and throw everything in it. It'll mask it. Everything tastes good in a casserole dish, right? And then extra things you can do too are making your own stock. I was always intimidated by making my own stock because I thought it was just really complicated. And I just bought like the big carton of stock every time, which is really just a waste of money because you're just buying water and you can make your own stock very easily. If any of you have an Instant Pot, I recommend you can make stock in 30 minutes. It's a miracle. But even if you don't, you can, within a few hours, you can make stock by just having a big soup pot on your stove and filling it up with scraps of leftovers, onions, anything savory, bones you can put in there, and leave it for a few hours just simmering, and that's your stock. You drain out all the big stuff, and then you have your liquid left over. It's very easy. And then I freeze all my stock for when I need it. Okay, some fun apps and websites that people have told me about and that I know about. The first three on the left-hand side here all do the same thing. I love them all. I happen to use All Recipes just because I have been using it for over 10 years and I love it. But Big Oven and Food.com do the same thing. But there's tricks that people don't know about it. So one, all of these, you can, of course, they have thousands of recipes. One thing they do though is you can actually do an advanced search, not just a search for a recipe, but you can put in the advanced search key ingredients that aren't just like apples and pears. You can put in whole things like pot roast. My favorite example is I cooked pot roast and we had it for dinner, we had it for lunch. And we had just enough that it wasn't really worth freezing, but I didn't want to throw it away and I really didn't want pot roast again. So I went to All Recipes and I did the advanced search and I put in pot roast as an ingredient to include. And it searched all of its, thousands of recipes and it came up with recipes where pot roast was an ingredient. And I found one of my favorite things is leftover meat Moroccan pie, where you can use any meat, shredded, diced, whatever. You put it in and it's a savory pie. I love that recipe. And that just shows you that you can search by ingredients, not just the kind of recipe if you don't really know what you want to cook. You can also search by multiple ingredients. Let's say you have celery, potatoes, and an onion. You can put all those ingredients into the advanced search and it'll pop up with recipes that meet your needs. And you can even do the opposite. You can exclude things like you don't want meat in your recipes. So you can say no meat or leave out chicken or anything like that. Very helpful. And all of these websites do that. Other things are Food Keeper is a great, it's made by the USDA. It's an app that lets you see how long food lasts typically. So not really expiration dates, but like I have yogurt, I bought it this date, how long should it last? And it tells you. Farm Stand and Harvest will let you know the closest farmers markets or CSAs nearby to get fresh local food. The other thing to make food last longer is cutting out all that travel time for food. So anytime food has to travel to us, so out of the state, and a lot of our food does come from out of state because we have short summers. Anytime it travels, it's cutting out storage time for you. So the closer you can buy food to you, the longer it will last. And Our Groceries is just one of many apps designed to sync with you, your spouse, or whoever in your family shops. And it's just your grocery list that you keep going. I happen to just use a Google uh, document, and my husband and I use that because we didn't know about our groceries until recently. But it's really easy to use. You add things to it, and even you could be at the grocery store and someone thought of something and they'll put it on your list from their phone. Pretty easy. Okay, so we're winding down, so please type in any questions you have. Other opportunities, if you really want to go more in depth on some of the topics we talked about, we do have food storage techniques, so going way more into food storage. That's next week on the 21st at 11 a.m. And I'll send you links to all these as well. Stress-free menu planning, so we're partnering with the Extension Office, and they do wonderful meal planning classes because that's one of their main things that they do is education for nutrition and using healthy food. So we're actually offering it in English, Spanish, and Somali starting next week. So I'll send you all of these as well. And one of my favorite resources is SaveTheFood.com. Save the Food was actually made by the Ad Council, which is our public service announcement branch of the government, and by National Resource Defense Council, the people who put out that report. So they both partnered and came up with this Save the Food campaign and website about 5 years ago. And it's wonderful. It has great tips. It has tips on how to get picky eaters, picky kids to eat food, how to cook differently, store it, and then yeah, just fun tips. And with that, I hope you did learn something about how to make food last longer and why it's really important and empowering. Like I hope that you feel empowered to really to be better in your kitchens and shop better. So any questions, you can take yourself off mute or type in as well.
Hi, Jenny.
Hey, Andrea.
Great job.
Thank you. Okay, well then you guys get off early, 15 minutes early. Thank you so much for letting me ramble for 15 or 45 minutes.
Thanks. My daughter was watching with me and she said she learned a lot.
Yay! Thank you. Glad to hear it. All right. I'll be sending up a follow-up email tomorrow, so you could always send me questions then too. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Hey, bye-bye. You too.